Kelly, hi. Hopefully this is working. I think I'm streaming and all that. Oh yeah, this is working. We'll wait for people to roll in. And here's the I hope people remember not to go to the tech garden. You did mention this. Oh, am I in the right Zoom? No, that's right. This has got to be right. Okay, 5:30 p.m. We'll just wait for people to show up. Karaoke. What does that have to do with programming? Whoa, Kitty, you get away from here. You better stay out of here. You're going to get locked up, locked away. You persist. Don't even think about it. All right, people are showing up. This is weird talking to like just nothing, silence, but hi everyone. I'm having some potato chips. I hope everyone can hear. And
I can hear you.
good. Ping the channel if you have any problems or whatever.
No, other than Bootstrap is going to be the bane of my existence with trying to lay out my front end.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be a journey. You're going to have several weeks of fun probably on your front end. I mean, we could take some time today to do that kind of thing, but we have some more ORM stuff to cover. I think this is the last day on ORMs, but Max will be sort of going into, he'll be picking up with some of this and talking about things like user accounts and authorization, and then also looking at a framework called Sails, which is sort of like Rails. It has a lot more built into it than Express does, and a couple other things. So I think we're ready to get started. I'll try to keep an eye on the channel, but unmute and holler if I don't notice it. Okay, so today we have one more day on ORM stuff. We're going to look at doing migrations with Sequelize, and we're going to look at using the command line tool to set up your projects, to put test data together, test fixtures, to generate some code that you're going to need for models and things like that. That should wrap it up for Sequelize. So we'll do that, and then we're going to work on the chat app for a bit today, and then I think we should have a little bit of time at the end. We can do really anything people want. If you want to talk about any of your models that you have ready today, or if you want to talk about Bootstrap or something like that. I think it'll be maybe an hour at the end of open forum. So I think let's get right into it. Can everyone hear me chewing when I'm chewing potato chips? I really should stop and talk. All right. So, ORMs part 3, migrations, fixtures, and more. The first thing we're going to look at is the Sequelize CLI. What's the CLI? What does that mean? Well, it's a thing you install with NPM, just like everything that we're doing in Node. CLI stands for Command Line Interface. So when you run npm install or Docker PS or npm or Node, I guess even Node, these are interfaces to various program functions that you can access all from your command line, and that's what that means. It's an interface for your command line. The command line means the VS Code shell or a terminal shell anywhere. Sequelize CLI is a program which has some tasks which it will let us run. Sorry, let me. This will let us run some database tasks for setting up Sequelize and everything. I just have to real quick. This is what I'm dealing with right now. This little kitty is bothering me and he's trying to eat my potato chips. So say hi, kitty. Say hi.
Just give him one, Gus.
I'm not gonna. He's got to eat his healthy food. He's got to go to a checkup soon, and I don't want to get in trouble with that. But okay, fine. You can have one, and then you're gonna get locked up, kitty. I'm gonna lock him up. All right. Sorry. So if I like pause and like there's noises or that's what's going on. He doesn't like it when I sit on the couch and not give him food or ignore him or stuff like that. Okay. Back to the class. So SQL CLI allows us to run things like npm install, like Docker stuff, but this is all using SQLize and setting up our database, setting up our models, our migrations, and things like that. So the first thing we do is, all right, you're getting locked up. Okay, 1 second, I'll be right back. All right, he's in timeout. Okay, the first thing you do to get started is this thing, npx, SQLize, CLI, init. So what the heck is npx? Well, it's like npm, but it's for running things, I guess. It's sort of probably within the last few years, or I've just been out of the loop, because this started showing up, a year or two ago, and like it's just like npx now. So it's like an npm install or an npm something, but it's for executing some kind of package or something that you've already installed with npm, and now you want to run it. And I think people are moving towards this instead of, oh man. I think people are moving towards this instead of like npm install -g, if you remember. You could also npm install -g SQLize CLI, but then you need like sudo access or something like that. And this is like nicer because it installs it locally or something. So anyway, some things will tell you to run npx, and that is just sort of like running something you installed with npm. So let's go here and let me discard this temporary stuff. Okay. So we have our chat room ORM folder. We could start a third folder, but I think I'm going to we'll keep going in this chat room ORM because it's going to add some files and folders, and we'll start being able to organize our project when we do this. So we'll still be all in this chat room ORM folder. First of all, first thing to do is check that you have Docker PS working. My cat is named Doc. He's a little doctor, and he's a little.
How was the apartment?
To read about
What?
the basics of the language, like what are the main variable types, the main control structures, and what is the overall structure of the smart contract. In your learning of Solidity, you will probably need to use Remix.
What's going on here? Who's talking? Or there's like a video.
Yes, it's a Solidity. Can you hear me?
Desktop code editor.
Who is this?
I'm sorry, I thought my audio off. It's a guy doing a Solidity. I don't know.
Surprisingly, there aren't many.
Okay, can you? I can mute you. How's it going, Elizabeth? I hope you're good.
I am. I'll get rid of this.
Okay, so I can mute. Just ping me. Send me a message when you want to unmute. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Okay.
Okay. Kelly, his name is Doc. He's a little kitty. And he's like I found him in the parking garage right near the tech garden last year. He's like almost a year old, and he's a very nice kitty often, but except when he's hungry. All right.
Also play a game called Capture the Ether, where you will learn. Really.
There's more. Okay. Yeah, you still have something playing there. Is this Solidity? Is this Ethereum stuff? You're doing blockchain programming? You're going to leave us all in the dust. With okay. Hi, Linda. Okay, I'm not going to eat many chips anymore. Okay, this is interesting having this remote. I'm just going to keep talking and assume it's working and people can hear. And I have these earbud things, so they're like, it's hopefully the audio is pretty good. Hey, Jaquay, welcome. Okay, so we are going to use the Sequelize CLI to start doing more things with Sequelize, setting up models, setting up migrations. So migration is going to let us keep our database and do stuff in it that is more like what you would do in production. If you actually had something done and people were using it, and you didn't want to just make changes to the database all the time and delete your tables all the time, you needed to keep that data. So the first thing to do, let's make sure everybody who, if you're in the VS Code terminal, get to the sandbox folder. And if at any time today you have any issues, I mean, just send me a direct message in Slack, or send one to Alice, I think, who might be here or not. Well, send Alice a message anyway, or me. And we can pause, and that's fine. This is good. We want, if you're trying to do something, you should be able to do it. So I'm going to stop my other containers. See, every day I go to work and I start all these other containers, and then I have to reset for the class. Okay, take a second here. So I have the Postgres running, and let's see, is there any changes to these scripts? I'm not sure if this is going to work from this folder here. If I do /miscost post. Okay, yeah, we the vars thing. Anyway, so you can do cd. So this is from the sandbox root folder. You can do cd guscost /postgres docker scripts, and then do /stop Postgres container like that. And I'm using tab to complete it, of course. You can run that anytime to stop the database. Now this, of course, will not necessarily remove all your data, because we're linking it to a file that's persisted. So once we have our migrations running, or if you're using that sync thing without the force, remember the force keyword, it will not delete your data to stop and restart it. If we do /start, I need STA, and then it realizes that I must be typing start, not stop. So it'll complete it now. And I get back this big long hash or whatever it is of the container ID. And if I do docker ps, you should check that it does show up and that it's still running. Okay, so our database is running. if we do cd from here, we do cd ... and we're in the Gus cost folder. So you might have to do cd Gus cost if you're in here. And we can do cd chat room. Now it does not complete ORM because it could be either one of these. So I can do tab twice and it'll show me what's possible from here. You know, it says, oh, there's two things. And double tab, whoops, every time you hit tab after that, I guess. But if I do an O and then another tab, it knows which one I'm going for now. So we're in this folder. And we can basically do npm install -- save sequelize CLI. And if everybody does this, you're actually going to all possibly have a conflict in your package.json or this package lock, because we're all going to add the same thing here. So I guess what I'm going to do is I'll commit it, and then if you have trouble getting, you know, if you have trouble with the conflicting change, you can go here and go to the menu up here and do discard all changes to get rid of yours, and then you should be able to pull fine. Because this is in my folder, they're gonna, if everyone's working in the same folder, it will overlap. Now, later on, maybe in office hours or tomorrow, or like when, if you want to get your own project started in the same way, you can follow the same steps we're going to take today. And this is how I'd recommend actually starting your complete project, which will contain the models that you're working on, and it will have the server and everything in your own folder. So you should be able to work on it from there. And you know, it's fine to start another GitHub repo if you want. I mean, the sandbox is for anything, so you can, anything that's in your own folder, use it for whatever you want. Anyway, yeah, so if you have to figure out a conflict, you can discard all changes there. But I'll say add sequelize CLI to chat room ORM dependencies. And I'll pull and then push. So if you now maybe discard if you ran this or not, try pulling if you want to try pulling on this tab, you should get the latest, which is really just changes to these package files to say we've added sequelize CLI. And if you did not run this command, you're going to want to, after doing this, you're going to want to run npm install. And you can do this as much as you want, because this will just basically, without anything after it, npm install will look at the folder you're in. It will find the package.json file in that folder, and it's going to look for dependencies that are listed in that file. And it will make sure all of them are installed. It didn't do anything, so it'll print out something like added, 20 packages or whatever, if it's actually installed something. In this case, it just audited. It actually checks them for vulnerabilities. So like hacks and problems with the packages that you might need to upgrade them. It'll tell you if any of them are broken or problematic. If you do create React app later, that has a bunch of vulnerabilities in it. And just because it has so many dependencies, but they're not actually things that affect your site, they affect the build tools. And so, it's not perfect, but this helps you know when you should think about updating your packages. Okay. So if we do npm install, we have sequelize CLI. And now we can do this next command, which is how you set up a brand new project. So if you go into your own folders, you need to set up a package.json. It's actually probably fine to copy this one totally. You know, you could just copy this file and maybe the server file, or you know, some combination. We'll help you out with that. But you can probably copy this file, name it whatever you want, and just run npm install, and then you'll have everything you need to run your server. And the next thing to do is, now that we've installed SQLi CLI, we can do npx SQLi CLI init. And this command is for setting up a new SQLize project in the sort of the recommended up-to-date official way, which has a whole lot of just things already kind of figured out and managed for you. So the first thing it's add is this config file here. And there's just a config.json file. And if you look at this, this has 3 objects in it, and they're called development, test, and production. So these are all actually the settings for your various environments. So you can actually run this in production. And what we'll look into in a couple weeks is like how to sort of deploy the same project that you have running locally, so that when you say ship it or deploy it or whatever, it goes up into the cloud and it runs there, and it runs with different settings because it's going to connect to the real database or whatever that is. So the databases have different names here, and there's 3 of them. We're only going to be using the first one. They're MySQL by default, but you can use either one. And it's pretty much as simple as switching this between MySQL and Postgres if you want to use 2 different databases. Now, of course, you have to Docker set up MySQL as well. So you'll have to have MySQL running instead of Postgres running in Docker or wherever it is. But then it should work with either one. Oh, cool. When was this? Is this? So you were actually doing forking and making your own repo. We tried that one or 2 days, and it was quite a lot to throw at people all in a couple of days. We might want to come back to this and do some more on Git. Right now, you can pull the sandbox repository directly. You don't have to fork it or anything, because everybody has, and you can push to it. So everybody has access to read and write to their own folders. Forking is for when somebody else maintains a version of something and you want to make your own version and change it, and then maybe ask them, if they want your changes. You can merge changes across forks, but a fork is like your own copy of some whole project. Okay. So this config file, we're gonna have to change. We'll go through these, but we're gonna need this to be Postgres, and we're gonna need the database to be, I think, Postgres, and we're gonna need the username to be Postgres, I think. And the password is CIC in development. Now, you don't ever want to put your password into a file that you save onto GitHub. You really don't want that sitting there on GitHub if it's an actual secret, that's an actual production secret. So it's really, this is iffy, but in development, the password's not very secret. We'll have to have a different way to deal with it when you're actually using this. That's not write your password out here and then save it on GitHub, because then, anybody with access to the repository, especially if it's an open source repository, that's everybody, could see your password. Okay, so let's save this. I don't know what this thing does. Operators, aliases, whatever that means. Okay, so it also makes a models folder. So we have a config folder, we have a models folder, and the models folder has like all this like stuff, read files, look for files that end with JavaScript, import, do some special magic stuff. Like basically don't touch the index in this folder. This is just set up to get the models. Any other files in this folder will be your models. And we'll make it so that each model has its own file. So they're nicely organized and you can like look, you know where to go to look for each model. The last folder that it makes is a thing called seeders. And this is empty, so it has nothing in it. But this is, a lot of other frameworks call it fixtures. This is where you'll put like test data for when you're developing and you want to have like some scenarios or some fake data that will let you test things out. You put that test data together with all the rest of your code in this folder, because then anybody developing it can easily get their own database running and have their own copy of some test data. So that's the three things it creates. It doesn't create a server.js, so it did not touch this and it won't make this. You still have to make this server.js, but it has the models all ready to go, and we'll have to import them into the server.js when we're ready. So first, we're gonna do this next command. So once you've done this, you have your folder set up with some nice organization for where to put your models. And this next command is going to let you create a brand new model. So we're going to recreate our user and message models again. This time we'll be using this CLI tool, and they'll go into their own files, and we should be able to sort of copy and put all the changes that we've done, all the improvements we've done. But you want to run npx sequelize CLI, so that everything starts with those two. And then this thing is called model:generate. So this is, we want to generate a brand new model. We give it a name. This will be user. And we give it attributes like this, where it's like the name of the column, the type of the column, and then a comma, and then another column and the type of the column. And I don't really like this in general. Like, I probably would end up just running it with name string for everything and then editing the file from there. The one other thing that it's gonna do though, is this is gonna make what's called a migration for this model. So this is actually going to, this is gonna create another file somewhere else, which records the fact that you initialized this model and that you started it with certain columns in it. And you're not gonna, once you use that file, once you actually use that file to edit your database, you're gonna wanna save that forever, because it's sort of like a record of some change that you made to the database. And the way that migrations work is you don't want to like just alter your model and then alter your database and hope they match. You're going to alter your model, make some migrations in the database, and then try run the migrations and be able to undo the migrations if they break, and have a record of every migration you've run along the way, so that you can reconstruct your current database from any previous database. And so that you basically know what every change you've made to the database is contains and did to the data. So this is, instead of just deleting the tables and recreating them every time you want to change something, this is a way to sort of keep a log and keep the tables ongoing and evolving. Because once you're using this in the real world, you don't ever want to delete the tables. So you have to modify them, and you have to basically like just keep track of all of those modifications forever. Okay, so we'll run this one. Nope, let's do here. So we're gonna do NPX, not M, November Papa X-ray. NPX sequelize dash CLI models generate. Oh, it's not models, it's single model colon generate. And then dash dash name will be user. Dash dash attributes will be name colon string comma email colon string. So we'll run this, and this will do a whole bunch of stuff, print out, you know, resolve, whatever that is, bunch of, and there's a little progress bar. And then it says new model was created here. Oh, and look, this links right to it. Command click. Cool. You can command and click right on the message. And new migration was created here. I guess you can't click on this one, but whatever. So see how there's a new file now in the models folder called user.js. And this has some kind of function, module.exports, and then it takes these dependencies. One's called sequelize, one's called data types. Okay, sure, whatever. And this basically is going to do the same thing that we did in the server.js. So we do .define. We give it the name of the model. And then these are listed out just like we did before. And these now have basically all of the things that we need, we can change to affect how the model behaves. There's another new file though, and this is in the migrations folder. And this says 2019, 06, 19, 22, 00, 18. So it's the year, month, day, hour, minute, second that I actually ran it. And then dash create dash user. So it's the first time we created a user model. This here is all in the beginning because then your migrations will show up in chronological order. So when you sort them alphabetically, you're gonna see, you know, the history basically of your database. And if we go to create user here, we can see that this has module.exports, which is some kind of object, which has up being this function, which does all this stuff. But look, here's some columns. See how it's made the ID column for us? So this is like, remember, the ID is automatically created, but you can see it right here in the migration because it has to, you know, basically tell the database to actually, yes, make that column. It has our name and email, and then it has created at and updated at, which are also automatically added. And then this down is the opposite. So every migration has, well, we'll get into that. But okay, so that's what we get just by running this. We get our model and we get our migration, each in their own file, each in the right folder. And then finally, now that we have the migration, we can do this last thing to run the migrations. So this is going to run all of our migrations up until now, and it will our database will be left as the latest version that represents all the changes we've made in our migrations. So we're going to do npx sequelize CLI db :migrate. Okay, so it printed out a whole bunch of stuff, and then we see here's the name of our migration, and it says migrating, and then it finished, it migrated. And no errors, so we got a deprecation warning on the thing that was generated by, okay, a Boolean value was passed to options.operators aliases. This should be removed. Okay, I don't even know what this is, but I'll remove it. But see, it's used our settings here now to connect to the database and to do this migration. So if we were to still run a server and we had different tables and things in here, this is a totally different, this doesn't really know about any of this stuff yet. But we might have deleted or overwritten some of the tables that are being used by this. Actually, let's take a look into our tables. So let's do new terminal. I'm going to make them side by side here. So this one will be for running our server, and this one will be for messing around in Postgres and stuff. I'm going to do cd .. post tab, and now I'm going to do /join. So this is how to get into the Docker container. And you see this prints out the name here. And again, if anyone doesn't see this or is getting errors, ping me and I'll keep checking. Oh, Kate, okay. Please install MySQL 2 package manually. Yeah, Kate, if you see here in the config JSON, I changed some of these values in development up at the top. So username is Postgres, password is CIC, database is Postgres, and dialect is Postgres. And that's probably the important one. And I guess all of these, you'd probably want your production database to be the same. So I'll save this, but I saved this with these changes. So if you didn't, maybe it was trying to connect to your database, but with MySQL. Let me know if that doesn't work or breaks. Cool. Okay, so I'm just tinkering around here. You don't really have to do this part, but let's see what we have here. If we do PSQL -U Postgres, we're now in Postgres shell, and we can do /DT. Okay, so it looks like it replaced, maybe it didn't replace. Interesting, look at this. So we still have messages, rooms, users, rooms, all of these from earlier this week and last week. We still have all of these, but Sequelize made 2 tables called Sequelize Meta and U users. And apparently it is okay with there being 2 different users with different capitalization. So we have not overwritten any of our data. And if we went back to our server and run it, it'll run just exactly as before. It doesn't know that we've done any of this yet. So that's interesting. So I'll do /Q to quit this, and I'll do exit. And I'll just trash can to get rid of that whole thing. Okay, so we have created, that's cool though, it has created a table for us. Now the table doesn't actually have, the right fields. I think we should, update this model a little bit to have the actual fields we expect. So let's modify this file to match what we used to have. Okay, so we have the server.js. And, you know, I'm just going to copy all of this. So we have email, name, state, and birthday with all of our special validation. I'm going to copy this whole chunk here. And instead of whatever's in this user, so we have define user and we have this object. So instead of these two, I'm going to paste all the stuff we have and save. Now, unfortunately, this is where this kind of library and pretty much everything that exists for JavaScript kind of falls short compared to something like Django or Rails. And that is, now that we've changed our model, I don't think there's really a good way to change the migration for this model or generate just the migration. I think it's not a very, like, if I could be wrong, and I'm gonna ask if Max or if anybody knows a way to do this, but if you go to generate, if you go to generate migration, it won't let you base a migration off of some model that you edited, I believe. So running migrations, migration skeleton. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah, I don't think there's really anything we can do here except update our migrations to match when we do this. So we can undo a migration though. So if we want to like revert, go back and then edit the migration and retry it, you can revert just the most recent migration by doing db:/migrate:/undo. And this will basically roll back. It'll, in our case, it'll delete the table we just made. And then we can edit the migration file and try it again. So we'll do npx sequelize CLI db migrate undo. And this will think for a little bit. Reverting and then reverted. So it's pronounced, it's taken this one and it's reverted it, it's undone whatever this did. And now we can go to here and say, okay, well, we have name and email. And what we're missing on these, I don't know of another better way to do this, is basically this stuff. So I'm not sure if validate is actually allowable on here, but unique and allow null, we should tell the migration that the columns, because these really actually affect the database. These are properties that are going to be saved on the Postgres. We're going to add a constraint that's a unique constraint, and we're going to make it not null in the actual database. So we really want these two. So I'm going to copy these two, and in the name, we're going to put them right in place. Save that, and then let's go check the email field. Oh, that was the email field. Whoops. So here, email, type string, unique, allow null. Okay. And I think there's more. We could probably set a length in the database, but I don't think that's, again, you don't need to do that in Postgres. We can easily validate to whatever length we need. So we'll keep the validate as is email, and that's all we need right now. Name is just a string. Okay, that's fine. We'll leave that one alone. Now we have some new fields though, state and birthday, which only have a type and a validate. but we're going to need to add these to the migration. Whoops. Okay. So we'll go back to the migration and see we have name, email. I'll add under email, I'll do state and make an object, and this is type sequelize string, and that's it. And then birthday, type sequelize. Is this date only? I forget. Yeah, date only. So these should match. You know, the migrations should match what the model has pretty much. Now, something like validate is only run in JavaScript, and the database doesn't care what validate is. So I'm not actually sure. Let's see what happens if we include it, but I don't think it's going to affect anything at all. So we'll add validate to the email just to see what happens. Okay. So now we can go back to our first command, the migrate command, sequelize CLI db migrate. And it didn't seem to care at all that there was validate, but I don't think it, you know, so I guess it's, you know, you could pretty much copy the entire, I think you could copy most of this from the model directly in, at least the first time. But the second time, you know, you're going to have to write your own migration. So we're going to have to, we'll try that out in a little bit here. But this first migration now has saved the initial state of our users table. Okay, so let's do this. Let's check. Go back to our slides because there's a little bit on migrations here. Okay, so what a migration is it's a nice sort of official or conventional way to update the structure of your database. So what tables there are, what columns there are, and to do so while it contains data that you can't delete, production data. Every migration has two halves. Now they're not always there, but they have an up and a down, everything. So if you see in our migration, it has up here and it has down. And basically what happens is when you run db migrate, it's going to do whatever's in the up half. And if you do db migrate undo or undo as many migrations as you want, it's going to run the down halves. So if you look here, you can see down has this drop table. So when we undo this migration, this is the time we created the table. So to undo it would be to remove the table. So it does drop the table. This is usually done because if you want to have control over your production database and have the most options. So when you deploy it, it should know what to do to move forward to the next database version, to have new columns or whatever it needs. But it should also know how to back out, how to say, never mind, let's go back to the previous version. Because just in case you need to do that, it's much better to have that available and tested and be able to undo things that you do in your real database than it is to not. Now, in a lot of cases, when you start to have a lot of data or you start to make changes that are irreversible in themselves, like changes that destroy information or drop tables or whatever, you can't really make a reversible migration that properly does it all the time. And doing so in these cases, you have to do a whole bunch of, you'd have to do a whole bunch of extra work or do things, and when you know you don't need them, I guess I wouldn't say they're not common, but they're not universal, not ubiquitous. Not every migration is going to be actually reversible in the real world, but the goal is to make them, yes, reversible. So you can do it forward, do it backwards, undo it, and as many times as you need. Okay, so Sequelize, for making these migrations, it has functions which sort of do in the same way that like find all is the same as doing a select, and create is the same as doing a create. And there's functions on the models that you can run to manipulate the database. It provides functions for those DDL. Remember, these are like alter table, create add column. It provides functions that map to all of those, or at least most of those that every database does. And you don't need to worry about which kind of database it is, whether Postgres has a special syntax or whatnot. They're all going to work the same because this adapts to whichever database you're using. So if we go to this page here, this is actually the all of the functions that you can run. Add constraint, add column, add index, bulk delete, change column, create database, create fun. So you can do a whole lot of stuff. Drop function. These are SQL functions. These are functions inside your database, like we were talking about yesterday, Eva. Okay, so remove index, rename this, rename table, upsert. That means update or insert, and so on. So these basically do the things that alter table and everything does, but you add them to your migrations in the same way we have create table here. You could say add column or whatever, and have your migration contain that instead. And then your migration becomes a transformation to the table, like a change to the table rather than the full, create the full table every time, because we've already created it and we're going to save this migration forever. So everything from now on should assume that, these columns already exist. Okay. Okay, I think that's the notes on migration. So let's make the message migration now. And we're going to do that by, I don't know if I can remember it, but we're going to say npx sequelize CLI model generate -- name space, and the name will be message singular, I believe. It's got to be user, yeah. And this will be -- attributes, and the attributes are going to be just text string. I know there's the user ID, which is a foreign key, but we'll modify this later. So we'll generate this model, and it will also generate a second migration while it's doing this. And now if you're running this in my folder, you're really going to want to not commit those changes and to discard them, because of these names being generated with the seconds, your file might be a totally different file than the one I just generated. So you'd end up with two of the same migration rather than the changes being merged together. So just watch out for that. If you see 3 or something, if you pull my changes in a bit and you see 3, that's one of them is wasn't merged together because it didn't know because the file name is different. These are going to be different. The second you run it depends, affects the name of the file. So, okay. So we have a create message migration, same idea, ID, text, created at, updated at. All three of those are automatic, and this is the one we specified. If we go to our message model, pretty straightforward. All we're gonna mess with is the text in here. And we will check what is the stuff we have. Oh, I forgot timestamp. Well, we'll add that. So I'm going to copy both of these and just paste them right over the top. Message. So, if you didn't already have a version of this, you would create your models with whatever columns you can think of, and then immediately start editing them to add these properties. So text and timestamp. Now I left out user ID, even though that's here. We're going to try a different method of doing foreign keys, but I really don't like it that much, and we might go back to just this. But yeah, which is actually down here, message.associate. And I'm really feeling like we should just not even bother with this because I don't like it. But okay, let's maybe try it. But for right now, there's no foreign key. The message, we'll save this. And the migration will have to have basically the same thing. So I'll copy these again. Instead of just text in the middle here, we'll have text and timestamp. And this has allow null and default value, which is this is also a database property. So default value is something you can set in, I think, in the database. Actually, I'm not really sure, but it probably won't hurt to leave it there if it is. Okay, so if we run migrate now, it will run the second migration, and we'll end up with our message table. So I'll do that. See, so the thing about migrations is, you can sort of save them and run them forward, run them back, try it out, So it worked. That's terrific. But I can immediately say undo, and it'll undo it. Okay, I'm going to commit this stuff first to models with CLI. So again, yeah, if you pull this and you've made a bunch of changes, you might have to discard those right here before or they might conflict. Okay, so we've reverted our message change. Now let's try to figure out what's the right way to do this foreign key, this user ID here. We should try to add this. Oh, and it looks like they're also using camel case for created at. So maybe we should make it look like this, user ID, instead of user underscore ID while we're at it. So Sequelize has what's called associations, and they're you can describe them basically like this, but this doesn't match what we've just generated, and I'm not sure if there's any explicit list of this, but you basically have to put the, yeah, this doesn't have anything to help to do. Doesn't help at all. It's not very good documentation. So let's tinker with this a bit and then give up and use the way we know, which is just saying there's a field called user ID and putting all the properties on it. But this whole fancy thing, I don't know, I'm tempted, I just want to try to get it to work at least once. So has many, we'd basically do something like this. Yeah, you know, this is, I don't like this at all. I don't like that the documentation, even if we figure it out, the documentation is not useful for this way of doing it at all. Let's see what happens though if we say, well, we have models. Let's say we have user.hasMany message. And I believe we'd have to use this models thing to say models.user and models.method as messages. And so then what do you do in the migration? Oh, I don't know. This is so flaky. We're gonna undo, we're not even gonna bother. I don't like this at all. It's so magic. If there's no documentation of how you would ever do it. If we check, there's no way that we've created a column by doing this. There's absolutely no way that that worked. Let me confirm though. No way. That's not possible. Did we? Oh, this is our, okay, I have this backwards. These are our old tables, I think, because we have something from the other day in this. Okay. So sequelize meta, let's try lowercase messages. Maybe this is the one with they're the same or they're similar. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna say migrate undo, just undo everything, and or so we can do drop every table in here. So drop table messages, drop table users, drop table rooms, cascade. So this will drop users and everything in the table that has foreign keys to users, which is that users rooms. Does not exist. Oh, rooms. \DT, we still have 3, drop table users. What is this?
Uh-oh.
Can everyone still hear me? I think I lost batteries on my microphone. Just
I can hear you.
okay, good. Okay. Table. That's weird. That says it doesn't exist either. Huh. Oh. Oh, public. Let's try this. Public dot. No. That's weird. DT. Well, that's super weird. Okay, so I had to do drop table quotes public dot quotes sequelize meta, double quotes, because these are names of tables, and I guess these are in a different schema or something. Drop table public dot users. Okay, now we're totally empty database. That's better. So if anybody sees when you do \DT, if you see any tables, and if you see the schema here is public or something other, see if you look up here, well, that didn't seem to matter at all. Maybe I just need the double quotes. So for the oh, right, because any table with capital letters in it, you need to wrap it in double quotes because it automatically decides to just say, oh, I'll look for a table with all the lowercase version of this, unless you say, no, this is the literal name of the table and you can't find it. And this is actually a good tip for why when you're making your own tables, you really never want them to have capital letters in them. You want it to be, you know, users, rooms, or something like that with underscores in this, because then you don't need to worry about the quotes at all. And I've forgotten about the quotes because it's been so long since I worked with a database that had, you know, this capital stuff going on. But I guess Sequelize is like not very good at knowing that, and they make their silly name tables like Sequelize meta. So whatever. Let's see what happens if we do db migrate now with nothing in the database. It should not see any previous data because that Sequelize meta probably stores information about migrations. So we deleted it, it thinks it's a totally fresh database, and we're doing create. Okay, so we have create user and then create message, and both of them worked. Let's try DT again. So we've created a bunch of badly capitalized. Is this actually just because, yeah, the default, this thing, the default is, it's probably whatever this is. So this should be lowercase, but I'm not gonna mess with it right now. This is, yeah, slightly disappointing tool. It has all kinds of weird, you know, quirks like this, but we'll get good at it. Okay. But if we do select, this is all I was trying to do, select star from messages, it's going to say messages doesn't exist. Yeah, I'll do quotes, select star from messages. There's definitely no user ID on there. And so this thing does nothing. And in order to make a user ID, you need some kind of thing in the migration. And in order to figure out what that is, we'd have to look into the source code and all kinds, you know. So this is, let's just give up on this. And I'm going to recommend all of this stuff, delete it and never ever use it. So you should just have the define, which has the same exact thing as it used to. At least this object will be the same exact thing as it used to. And then it returns it, and there's none of that stupid associate magic nonsense, which never works. So let's go fetch our user ID column here and just pop this right in here. So it's an integer, it's not nullable, and it references the user table. It's a foreign key to user. Okay, and now we also have to update our migration. First, I'm going to undo it. So I'll do db migrate undo. And this should say reverted the create message. Okay. So let's check out, let's see what's in create message, and let's paste the same thing we have. So user ID, but actually let's make it user ID like this. Why not? Because that's everything. Instead of the underscores, it's converting to a JavaScript friendly camel case. So we'll go with it. User ID is either the last column or you could put it right here. I'm going to put it right at the end, just so I guess that's fine. So user ID like that. Let's make sure that it's defined with the same convention in both places. And we'll have all of this, stuff here. So let's try migrate once more. Now that we've updated our migration, we can try re-migrating it. User is not defined. So before we defined our user model in the same place as messages, but we don't have a user model anymore. So here's the first thing I'm going to try is we have these modules, right? And we can, the whole point of having these modules, oh, I'm going to get rid of this useless magic nonsense. The whole point of having these modules in separate files is you can import them and require them, and they let you organize your stuff in different places. So this thing exports the user model. So let's try importing it from into the file next door here so that we can set up this foreign key. So we'll do const user equals require. And here, rather than this being like the name of an NPM package or something that we've installed from the internet, you can also require modules which are local. And I'm not sure if anybody, any of the units we went through did modules and requiring from different parts of your project. But this is how you start building out a larger project in Node. So this is Node. This is not going to be, browsers have a slightly different way of importing. It's very similar concept. So this same rule applies, but they don't use the word require here. So it's going to be // user. So it's the name of this file. And I think you can do .js, but it doesn't care whether you put the JS because it's always JavaScript. It's more, you know, you're importing some JavaScript. And this here is just like you do // whatever's in, this is the current folder. So this means go in the current folder and find a module or a file called user. And, you know, it's got to be a JavaScript file. And treat that as the module.
And because we've defined this module exports, which is another Node thing, this is what Node.js uses for modules and the like, because it's, I mean, it generated all this, but because it has a module.exports here, this is actually going to be what that module exports. So we can require that other module, set it to the user, and then we should be able to use it here. Oh, but the problem is, what do we do about the migration? Oh boy. Because this, do we require the same thing? We're going to go down a rabbit hole here. Sequelize migrations foreign key. I guess there's all these blog articles rather than the real docs, which should have how to do this. Looks like you can just put it in a string. That's pretty nice if that works, but gee, it would be nice to have that documented. Okay, so we're going to put capital U user in a string, and there's no type of a string, and this should work fine. I suppose we could try it here as well, just so we don't need to remember to import everything all the time. But let's try it this way first. See what happens when. I'll comment this out, and we'll try it when we get to actually run the server. See what happens. But for the migration, yeah, definitely. There's no. You're probably not supposed to import the actual model, and this. It looks like this is the convention. So let's see what happens. Relation user does not exist. There's no way that it has to be users. Unbelievable. Well, that's really weird, and I don't like it at all. But that's how it works. You have to make this be the table name, which is the plural, version of what the model. Oh, it matches whatever this is. Okay. So in this migration, we called it users here. And it has to match whatever you called it here. It doesn't care what you did here. I guess, how does it know that this is plural? This to look in the database for a plural version of this. Maybe it's just a convention. I'm gonna dig into this a little bit and see if this can make a little more sense, like have some scientific rhyme and reason about it, because it just seems slightly arbitrary and not incredibly well thought out. But I guess once we get the hang of it, it should all work. So, man, it's called model, but it's a table name. Oh man. Okay. Anyway, in this case, I'm not sure what we do. What is this one? All right, let's continue and let's set up our server and see what happens. Okay, so now we have our two models here, and we have our migrations, and we've migrated. We have our tables, we have messages and users, and if we go back to our server, now in theory, we don't have to actually keep these. We can just delete this and delete this because we don't actually need we don't need to put the get sequelize anywhere. Our models are all taken care of, and we should just be able to import the models directly. So if we do const user, we should be able to do require /models user. And in the same exact way, we should be able to require models message. Now this one, this is our, remember our function on the user model. I think we should move this into the file, but I'm just gonna leave it for now, and we'll move it later. Message, oh, this is another model. Get rid of this. We don't need this anymore. Well, let me comment this out because we're running migrations now, and the migrations are how we update the database, and we keep our tables and everything in sync. So this, I'll put another note here that says, note, we are using migrations now. No need for this. And then the rest of it should be all the same. We use our user and our message models, and we have our endpoints. We don't, I guess we're not using those because they're dim. But let's see how this goes. Node-mon server.js. And of course it crashes on the first time. Cannot set property send message of undefined. Oh, that's fun. So the user prototype is undefined. Well, I see one problem here. Our old models, we had sequelize for everything, and we really should use this data types. This is what this is for. So all of these are data types dot whatever. But that's not the issue we're seeing, because we're saying, okay, module exports equals these, and then send over here, do this function and return that. But what this is, so what the export is a function. So I think we're going to have to actually inject sequelize into these in our server. And let me make sure of that. This doesn't help at all. And this is going to be a totally different convention. Look at this, a third convention. Right. We're going to try, because I think I have a decent understanding of what we need. We need to pass two arguments, sequelize itself and this data types, and then return the function. And this scaffolding does nothing to help set this up, that part up for us. And even the documentation has absolutely nothing about it. That's great. We're going to do const sequelize equals require sequelize. And we're going to run this as with sequelize and with sequelize dot data types. Why does it, who came up with this convention? This is, oh, this scaffolding is not very good, but let's try these. So db, sequelize, whatever. We'll run both of these. Okay. How was this before? So we had a new sequelize. We may still have to do this. We may be on our own for doing all of this setup, but I'm really finding that hard to believe that there's nothing when using the CLI. There's absolutely nothing about this, so we're sort of on our own. Okay, so I think I'm just gonna have to write some code, and then you're gonna have to use it, and you'll probably have to copy it out of this this project and into wherever you're doing by hand, because it looks like the CLI does not help with it. So if we do the same convention here, we have db and this. Because we called define on it before. And that didn't work either. Sequelize is not defined. Oh, I forgot to data types in all of these places. Okay, so I think this is, this works, but man, that's very disappointing that the CLI does nothing to help you. That's not gonna work. Maybe we don't need, no. All right, well, looks like that works fine. I would be surprised if our default value here works, but that's what we needed to do. What I'm going to try to do is make a project scaffolding with, this server thing that works with what is generated by the migration thing, because then everybody can run the command to migrate, to generate their models. You can run this to get everything started. You don't have to hand type all of your migration code and everything, and you can edit it in the way we've done today. And then as long as your server is configured in order to work with those conventions, all you have to do is require like this and set up like this. So this will all be part of the boilerplate. This will just be part of the server that we do. Let me get the local tunnel running here. And we should be able to connect to it finally and get our data. So here's our messages. They are empty. Users are empty. We still get our validation. Oh, moment is not defined. That's not the same error as before. What happened is we have our validate in our user model here. We have our validate functions and we're using moment. And we haven't required moment in this new file. So we need to do const moment equals require moment. And our validation won't crash with that error. It should actually crash with the please be younger error, which is really, yeah, not necessary, but let's, we've created a user, that's all working. ID of the user is 1, still no messages. And if we post with user ID, now remember it's user ID like this, and we have 1, we're going to get the error. This is probably because we're using our special function here. I'm gonna, we'll try that again later, but if we have, remember this, we use the find by PK and then use the actual method on the model, just as a demonstration. And it really wasn't the best use of this convention to run the model method in this case, because the errors we're getting back were not as good, and there's some extra things we have to do. It's not really worth it here. So let's restore this to be message equals message.create. And this will be user ID is request.body.user ID. Oh, this is probably why it was broken. Perhaps because we still have the underscore here. But let's not mess with it. It's good to have better messages. So user ID is this, and text is request.body.text. And then we're going to send OK. Otherwise, we'll get a good error from the database this time. OK, so it worked fine. And the timestamp seems to have worked as well. So, gee, that's kind of weird, but I guess data types.now is totally fine. I'll have to look into that. But you know, yeah. I'm on the fence about whether to just go with this weird convention or to have this be like, you know, take our, what we expect, which would be that. I'm going to leave it alone for now, but that's basically all there is to having models and migrations that are set up with the CLI and which make a little bit more organization. Once you get around all of the just inconsistencies and figure out all of the problems with the documentation, this actually all works. This is still kind of like, I don't know if I really like how all of this is set up, but seems to work. So string user singular here, in the migration, string users plural. This, yeah, this is really the table name. This should be the name of the table. Okay, I'm gonna check this in and finish connecting new models to chat room ORM server. Okay, so you should be able to get all that. And what we've really done is that anybody now can run the commands that we use to migrate. And because we have the migrations in this folder, they're going to be saved, and they're going to be saved in GitHub. So anybody who gets the latest, any of you, if you pull the latest and you run this npx sequelize-cli db:migrate, this is going to update the database in order to have whatever's represented in these files. And there's actually one more thing we should probably do right away is here we have our settings, and the sequelize CLI uses all these fine. It has no problem with this. But if you look in our server, we're actually had to still connect to the database, you know, the old fashioned, or the way that, you know, there's really no help from the CLI in order to do any of this. So we're going to need to just be sure to replace these right now with the values from our actual config file. So we do const config, maybe db config equals require. And you can actually require a .json file just like you require anything else. I think you need to put .json in it. So we do .config/config.json. And now here, instead of having to make sure these all match, we can say new sequelize, and the first value is dbconfig dot development dot, I believe it's database first, then username, then password. So we're going to say, make some new lines here. And then we have host. This is config development host. And then dialect, and then that's it, I think. Okay, so what this will do is guarantee that every time we change something in this config, or eventually we'll change this to not only use development, we'll use whatever the environment is. So in production, we'll use the production config, and we're ensuring here that we are getting the same values that sequelize CLI and our migrations and everything else is going to use, because we're using that config. So if we restart, we should still be able to, whoops, I probably killed the local tunnel by doing that. Nope, it was short enough where it didn't notice. So we're still connecting to the database. We're still all good. Here's our message. Here's our user. If we post a user, we'll get an error because email is not unique. So everything is working as before. We've just started moving our models out here. We have now our migrations, and we're not we're not deleting our data every time we change the database. So the next thing we'll do is we'll try a new migration where we just add a column. And we can modify the tables and then make the migration to match. And this will let us control how we're updating our database without deleting any of the data. So we'll do that after a break. Let's say, let's come back at 7:25, and I will first commit, use config variable to connect to Postgres. Yeah, and we'll do a break, and then we'll do some of that, and then I think we'll do a little bit on test data, but the rest of the, if we have any time after that, we can do any other questions you have about other stuff. So thanks for your time and patience on this SQLized journey with me. It's working all right, and I think we've got a decent boilerplate so that everybody should be able to just copy basically what we're doing in the server and then use the CLI for all your models. And remember, just like delete all this crap, never use this, or at least I don't recommend it. I don't know. I've got to maybe someone, one of the instructors, I'll ask around if anyone actually knows how to use this stuff, but I would just say delete it and let's, use the, just use what we're used to, which is foreign key is a foreign key. All right, I'm assuming everybody understands that it's break, and see you in a bit. try some new make a model here. So get out of here. Get out of here. So this is how models start. What the heck? I mean, this is such a weird setup. So make that, delete that, and then you have to import them. Like this. I'm just baffled. There isn't like a more, there's not a complete example of this. Is that really what they do? So this is a classic place you end up a lot, especially with libraries that are not very well documented. Just digging through the source code. So here's the CLI. Okay, whatever that is. Commands. Model generate. So there's name, attributes, and force, and that's literally it. Okay. So I can search data types in this repository and just see what we got. So it's in lib data types. Oops. Data type, so now is a data type apparently. That doesn't make any sense. Three of these are special default values. They should be not used to define types, but for some reason we put them in a module called data types. All right. Oh, let's check whether this thing works. You get out of here. Okay, messages create. Maybe this will work. We lose a servant. Oh. Oh yeah, it's not running. Help. Okay, if we create a message, it uses that new function. Message.userid cannot be null. Maybe our function is bad. Yeah, we got underscores everywhere.
Hey Gus, it's Eva.
Hey, Eva,
Did you teach yourself all of this stuff to begin with?
did I teach myself?
Yeah. Or did you go to
Um,
school for it or?
I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I took a year or so of like C++ and stuff in school. And other than that, yeah, mostly this, and I learned from people at where I worked, and some, you know, doing some tutorials and books and just reading. You know, once you get to, there's a lot of difficulty at first, just kind of like getting your bearings, you know, and you can't just, I wouldn't expect you to be able to go to just dig through the source code and make sense of it, but that becomes, you know, a technique. It's a technique you'll end up using. Once you are proficient enough with a given language to follow, you know, and look at the structure and just kind of like sleuth out the pieces you need to decode.
Sorry, not you.
You can do, it's a very perfectly valid to go dig around in source code like that.
No, I'm just so impressed that anybody learns this that way, because I don't know if I would stick with it if I didn't have a class.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely went to, you know, I never really, I had classes was my first exposure for at
Yeah.
least a year in college, almost 2 years probably in college, but I mean, it wasn't, you know, full, it was like 1 or 2 classes a semester, and I mean, I know like Ryan, like
He's
probably
so
had
impressive.
some high school classes, but he never, I mean, he just went to work instead of college. So he's, all the stuff he's learned is like just, he does it every day on his own. And he's gotten to the point where it's, you know, he can just kind of seek out the information and seek out the source code and understand the source code. And I mean, really the other thing is there's communities for almost everything. Like,
Right.
if you look up like Sequelize community, probably not a great one for this, but there's an issues page. That's one of the first places. It's generally not like a good, I don't know, it's not a good idea to just ask random questions on here. But if they have like a Discord maybe,
Riley, what have you got? My dogs are learning coding along with me.
oh, nice. Yeah, it doesn't seem to have that big of a community. I mean, we're kind of in a tricky, you know, place where it's like the language we're teaching for this scope is JavaScript, you know, and a lot of these tools that we're learning this week are much more commonly used on servers and backends and databases and stuff. So a lot of the tools that are, you know, the mainstream tools for doing this kind of stuff are in Python, you know, or Ruby. I don't know which one's bigger now, but they're both much bigger. PHP has some kind of like ORM stuff. C# has it, Java has it. They're all quirky in their own way, you know, just weird. I mean, Python might be the least, you know, Python is a pretty common first kind of step. And, you know, it has a big community and everything. And we use it at work, and a lot of people just use it because it's an obvious choice for this kind of thing, for a server with a database, you know. And the other thing is once you start sort of like spending more time, you know, once you get into it more to the point where you recognize patterns and you recognize things like databases and ORMs and stuff like that goes across patterns. and across languages, then it gets a lot easier to just kind of like it gets easier to just jump into something brand new, some other language.
Yeah.
There are, you know, a lot of similarities between all of, you know, Python, Ruby, JavaScript, C#, Java, C++, and they all have their own quirks and a lot of details about them, but they're all sort of imperative languages where you do things in order. And then there's a whole other family of like really out there academic kind of like languages that are functional and they're like Lisp or Haskell and you know, some real smart people work on those a lot and work with those, but they're way less common in like normal everyday, you know, programming. Most people go with one of the imperative or object oriented or some combination of that because it's much more universal and it maps much closer to how you think about, you know, you think about solving a problem in steps and you know, by running functions, everybody can kind of like pick up those basics, and they're pretty universal. A lot of the big differences are the details of how, you know, where to look for certain library things, certain utilities, how to do some various things with strings varies a lot between different languages, like slicing pieces out of strings or checking that a string matches or whatever. The types that are available are slightly different. And the syntax, you know, some of them don't have semicolons. Python has no semicolons. It has tab indentation. So you have to get your indentation. I mean, honestly, you might want to check out Python and try some introduction to it because that is one of the things that actually helps people or is one of the reasons it's used as kind of a learning language often is because it basically builds the tab spacing and the indentation into part of the language. So the correct function or something like that is one that actually looks consistent and it has the right indentation. And the other option for that is a language called Go, which is much newer, but it's actually pretty big. And it has its own kind of like formatting. It has an official way to format and it automatically formats. And it also, I forget whether it has semicolons or not, but it has all this stuff, databases, ORMs and all this stuff. And it's very fast and it's very good for network stuff. And it's supposed to be very easy to pick up. So it's, you know, I haven't really used it myself, but those are all the things I hear about it. And I'm sure I could use it, you know, I'm familiar enough with the patterns again, and just the general practice of how to go about, you know, looking up information and how to go dig through source code when you need to, you know, and also like just the kind of like understanding that sometimes you need to go dig through the source code and it just will take you all day, you know, and you won't get very far in a whole day. You know, that's a normal part of it, and just kind of like becoming used to that, getting used to that and having that be sort of a way of life is a big part of it too.
Yeah.
You know, definitely will take me less time now to look up this stuff, but you know, I'll get stuck for a day easily, often, you know, and you know, I used to get stuck for a day a lot more often, you know, at least a day. Anyway, so, okay, yeah, but that's, I mean, you know, it's been a long time since I was in college and before, you know, I did logo a little bit in high school. And so I've been programming for quite a long time, and more than 10 years.
And this is why I keep my mic muted.
Yeah. Is that a nice doggy?
They're very nice, but they're loud. Hippie. I'll mute it again.
Do you hear the doggy? He wants to be your friend. Need to be out of timeout. He's being very nice. All right. Let's get back to back to the code. Well, here, I'll stop this. Okay, so I am going to check in a change here. This, no, we don't want that. We don't want this. I made a couple fixes just to during the break to check that this function that we wrote last time, this model function that's send message, every user can do user.send message. Just to make sure that's still working if we need it. So I've commented out the other thing, the bare bones way, and uncommented this and fixed these underscore user IDs here. So I'm gonna push this up real quick. And we'll go from there. Fix user model method. And then I was just tinkering a little with the creating a new model, and it just appears to be what you need to do is do what we just did. So foreign keys are going to be weird to work with, and I suppose that's fine. Let's see real quick. So now that we have it running, the first thing let's do is let's just see whether we can require like this, because I'd like this a lot better than, you know, having to remember that this is a string that's singular that matches something, and the other migration, it's bad enough to remember that migration is like the plural. This has to match this table users. So this is the name of the actual SQL table. We really should have these lowercase. I mean, it's a bad, you know, it's bad to have this be the name of the thing. But anyway, this string, in this case, it's a string and it has to match. So on the message model, though, let's see if we can import the user model from next to it and if that will work. Well, it seems to work. It works just fine. Okay, that's good, I suppose. So I might as well check in this change as well. Rather than this be another magic string that's weird, you can require it from the other module. And this works just like it did when they were both in the same file. The migration is the weird one. It has to be the name of the table in a string. Okay. So let's see. In our Postgres shelf, we do select star from quote messages. We have user ID at the end there. And let's just see, can we insert? We probably can't insert into messages. I hope we can't, because that means our migrations are still busted. Values. Actually, let's try it from the API. So post a message, user ID will be 99. And we get an error, that's good. And we get an unspecified error because of our weird function. But let's re-comment the other set of stuff and see what the actual database error is. Make sure this is a real foreign key, because we want to make sure this is all working. So cool. So that's good to know that this is actually making a real, totally real foreign key in this table. It didn't just ignore this thing. That's good. That's very good. Okay, so we have our 2 migrations. Now let's alter one of our models by adding, let's add a column. And let's show how you'd make a new migration, which lets us keep all of our data, but start changing the table. So let's say user has a new field, and how about that field is, I don't know, let's say favorite color. And this will be, oops, type data types dot string. So now in this convention, when we have our boilerplate and everything, you got to remember, we don't do sequelize dot string or whatever. We do this data types dot string and so forth. And then sequelize here is used for, is just, this is going to be written already when you generate your model. So it's just used to go here. So favorite color will be a string. It's nullable and it doesn't have to be unique, so we don't need either of those. But let's add some validation. And this will be, is this how we did it before with the regex? So we do is and then a regex. And let's make sure it's only lowercase and at least 1 letter. And that's all we can have, no spaces, no fancy color names with spaces in them. It's just a regular color. So we have a little bit of validation on that. And now if we try to load a user right now, we've added a favorite color to the model, but we haven't synchronized anything. We haven't wiped out the database. We haven't made a migration and we haven't migrated. So if we go to users and we try to fetch users, get users or post or probably anything, what happened? Unhandled promise rejection. That's not good. Okay, so why did it not? So it looks like it's just sort of errored in such a way where we're never going to get a response. So we get users. We tried to find all and we got an error. We never were expecting an error in this kind of thing before. So we really need to put tries and catches everywhere. This is, unless you want it to just possibly break when it can't connect to the database or if it gets a weird new database error and you never get anything back because we never resolved this promise. We need to catch something. We errored. So let's add a try. We put both of these inside the try, and then we do catch error. And we're going to do the same exact thing as everywhere, and that is send the error. And while we're at it, we probably should do the same thing here. So we'll try this. Catch the error. and send it back. So this is a little inconsistent though. We're sending an array here and an object like everywhere else. Why don't we make everything line up? So this will be status okay, users is users. And down here we'll do status okay, and messages is messages. So instead of just arrays, we'll send the same format back everywhere. This is generally good in your API. I don't know if status being here actually makes sense. We actually probably should do something about that. But you're gonna want pagination maybe. You're gonna want like page 1 through 4. And Sales and other frameworks will handle a lot of that kind of stuff for you once you get into it. But you know, it's at least if it's gonna be a particular way, it's good to have it be consistent so people aren't just surprised all the time. There's a thing in programming called the principle of least astonishment. And that's basically when you have 2 options of a way to do something. And you don't really have any good reason to do one over the other. And you're not sure, you know, like whether one is a better design or something. The one way to decide between them is to do the one that would astonish or surprise somebody less. So the less that you surprise somebody with how you've built something, generally the better, because surprising someone, or you know, oh, it sounds great, it's a surprise. But in the case of like somebody trying to use your software, we've seen a lot of this today. We've been surprised and astonished by how some of the sequelize, some of the things it does and some of the things it just never talks about. It's just weird and surprising. And that's bad when you're programming, because you don't want to be surprised by something, because that means it broke. If it's surprising and it's not what you expected, it's broken. And then you got to fix it. So anyway, that little spiel is like, you know, this is less surprising than having just users be returned here, and in every other place you have it wrapped in some kind of thing that says status and whatnot. Really though, we should probably change all of them eventually. Okay. So now we're trying and catching everything. We should be able to see the actual error we get. Oh, and you saw down there, it timed out. And it wasn't, it waited for a response until basically, until the client said, well, I'm done. I'm not going to wait anymore. Clients usually have a maximum amount of time that they'll wait. And because the server crashed, it's never going to respond. So the client eventually just stops waiting. And that's called a timeout. Okay, we need our tunnel back because our tunnel crashed. And now if we get this response, we're going to actually see our error. And this is a fun error. SQLized database error in a C file. That's fun. Error missing column. Look at that. So that's pretty much the problem we have. Error missing column. And it doesn't really tell you which column is missing, but definitely SQL is saying there is a missing column. Not a very good error message, but it's what we expect. Again, because we've added this column to our model, which means SQLize is going to try to go find a column in the database that matches this, and it's going to try when it's saying on behalf of the, you know, when you say fetch all or whatever, SQLize will write a query that's like select. Oh, it's right here. And it doesn't print anything, but this is broken. If we try to copy this from over here right into our Postgres shell, we can see the actual error. Column favorite color does not exist. So does everybody get what's going on here? We've added a column to our SQLized model, which says, oh yes, our user model has this new field or column or whatever. And behind the scenes, you're supposed to manage the database, and you're supposed to pull this, the value that's here, which is in the table, or should be in the table, you're supposed to pull this out of the database. So every time it's trying to get the user, that's actually very nice. We get the debug message because we can see it is trying to run this query in the database. And if we try it, we can see exactly why that's not working, because the column doesn't actually exist in the database yet, because we haven't done the migration, or we haven't done the sync, or whatever it was. You know, previously we had this sync thing, which again is just destroy the whole database and rebuild all the tables. So they always matched, right? That's one thing this gets you, is they always match. Well, yes, they always match because we're deleting them all the time and rebuilding them according to our latest models. We kind of need to keep now our database in sync with our models as we go forward, because if we're going to want to change it again going forward. We don't want to delete the database, so we have to find a way so that, you know, our application can be updated and our database can be updated, because they both need to be updated. So this is, you know, obviously not going to work until we add the migration. So the way you do that is, and I'm not sure if I included this in the slides, but there is another, there's another command, which is to, it's called, no, it's not that. There's a migration generate. Where is this documented? Maybe it's not, like many things. But okay, let's close our server and let's do npx sequelize CLI. I think it's migration generate. Oh, and we need, man, it thought for a long time about that. Name debug underscored. Oh, look at this. You can tell it to use the underscore for those created at and updated at. So if we really wanted it to be underscores everywhere, we could do that. That's cool. Okay, migrations path. You can override all kinds of stuff, but we're keeping a lot of things as default as possible, so we don't have to like always be thinking about all of these extra options. Migrations folder, we'll leave that all default. That's all good. Okay, so we need a name at least. So we'll do npx sequelize CLI migration generate dash name, and this will be add favorite color, or just let's say user favorite color. And this here with dashes, this is called kebab case because it looks like a shish kebab. So there's snake case, which is underscores in between lowercase words. There's upper snake case, underscores in between uppercase words, like all uppercase. There's camel case, which is the first letter is lowercase, and then every word starts with an uppercase, but they're all together. There's no underscores or anything. There's Pascal case, which is every word, including the first one, starts with, and there's, you know, I know nobody's following what I'm saying because it's hard to imagine that quickly, but there's a lot of casings and a lot of people have opinions on which ones are best and everything. Yeah. Okay, new migration was created here. So we can command and click, and this is our new file. So basically it just made the skeleton of what's in our other migrations, but see, it put the date so that it shows up, it's gonna show up in the order we create them. And gave the name that I gave it is right here. And then in here, see there's some comments which say, add altering commands here, return a promise to correctly handle asynchronicity. Okay. So example, you're supposed to do this. So let's just start with that example code. And we're not creating a table, we're adding a column. So I believe there's an add column. And let's look up the how to use that is at this link. So all this query interface. So whenever you're writing your migrations to alter things, you're going to always be going to this resource to see, to see how to use all of these possible things. So add column, it's table first, then key, then attribute, then options. Okay, so what is key? Oh, key is like the name of that it's the name on the object that it will be mapped to. So we'll say add column to capital users. Man, yeah. So our tables are capital. I don't know about that. I think all of this, it should be lowercase or something like that. These should be lowercase. This should have a lower. I don't know. So, but it's a capital table. So that's our table. We're going to call our column the same thing that you would call it on here, but as a string. So favorite color. And favorite color is going to have this stuff, right? Is that right? Yeah. So I believe it's this, users, favorite color, this. It looks like. There's no example. Table string, key string, attribute, and options. I don't think we need options, but I believe this is it. So we add column, we do table, key, the object, it's the same kind of object that we have everywhere. And this time it's sequelized. We get sequelized because this thing is just inconsistent as heck, but whatever. And the reverse. So we're going to do up and we're going to do down because we want to be able to run it, undo it as much as we need. So it's always good to take a little bit of extra time if it's easy to remove the column in the down. So we're going to go to the R's. Oh, drop. No, not drop. It's remove column. So table name string, attribute name string, and no options. So it'll just be these two. And it's remove. Okay. So now that we have our new migration, we can run the same command that we always run to get our latest, to just make our migrations up to date, which is this npx sequelize CLI db migrate. And this thinks for a little bit. And it says it migrated. It didn't explode. That's a good sign. Let's try running our server and see if we have any trouble now. Well, there it is. Favorite color. It's null. Let's see if we can add a user with a favorite color. We'll call it a fancy color, periwinkle, blue, green, ochre. And it doesn't like it because you can't have validation is on favorite color failed. Yes, that's what it should do. Let's see, blue. Oh no, database error. Insert into users. Why did it break? So we can go to our terminal again, and it says executing, insert into users, values this, returning this. Oh, it doesn't tell you what the values were. Let's try the get and see if, no, we did the get. The get works fine. Num utils. Did we, the type is the wrong type. We made it an integer. That's not right. So we want to change the migration, and normally you don't want to change migrations. You want to make new migrations to undo them, but we're still in development. We haven't shipped this. We can always trash our whole database and start over. And the down is not going to care what type it is. It'll just remove it. So we can always just do this, which is the undo. And this is going to roll back this migration, which we just changed, which is super weird to, that might be a little wary of like changing and then running a migration in production. But again, we're in development. Definitely once you've run a migration in production, it's a bad idea to go and change it for any reason or delete it or anything. They should be pretty much just like write only. You add migrations to here, that's the proper way to do it. But again, we're in development. We can get away with this. So we reverted it and it ran the down, and we should have from, we should have no more favorite color. Yep, it's removed. So now we can run it forward now that we've changed this back. And as long as our model also has a string, yep, we're good. As long as everything's, now when we try to write, it should not explode and say the integer is a problem. It would help if I ran the server and then also fix the local tunnel. Email must be unique. Well, of course. Okay, that worked. So our column is all set and it's working fine. And when we get our users, we will see something. What are we going to see? Okay, that just took a long time. We're going to see null for the one we had before and blue here. So this is how you add a migration, which is going to modify your database. You just add new file. You just keep adding files here. This gets bigger and bigger. In some tools, there's a way to squash together migrations, so you can actually try to save, if you have like, once you get hundreds and hundreds, you can try to sort of combine them together, because you're never going to go back that far to the middle, to the 37th migration. So you want to roll together all 1 through 100 migrations into one. And some tools will do that for you. I'm not sure about this one. I would be surprised if this will do that. But totally Django will, totally Rails will, the real heavyweights, the natives, maybe Sales. Max will have to get into that next week. So we've added a column with our migration. This now, once we deploy this to production, this file stays here forever and we never change it. That's the way to do it. And we now have favorite color matching that in our model. And it's really, so this, rather than having this being generated every time, which is what a more mature or a better ORM tool might do, the one thing that kind of sucks about migrations, and everything else, I don't think it's that bad. We just have to know how to set up the server. We need the example to work, and then it's pretty easy to use. But this, every time you do a migration, you just have to be sure to add it yourself. You're going to have to create an empty one and then run things like this to add the column or modify the column. You might have to drop the column and then add it like manually, because sometimes, if you want to change a column, the data type or something, the database won't let you just change a number to a string all the time, because it doesn't know what to do with what's already in there. So you might have to get rid of what's in there. It's kind of rare to do things like that, like really sort of mess around with like the types of columns. But you might want to add a constraint or something like that. And in that case, there are methods here, which are like add constraint, add index. So you can do a whole lot more than just adding and removing columns. And this, you just have to look at this interface here and know how to do this. Now, I believe there's also an escape patch, which is just to run some raw SQL. So you can just probably pass it a string somewhere and have it run that string. Where would that be? Maybe you use Sequelize. Yeah, you probably just use sequelize.query like we did last week. So you don't use this at all. You could just do sequelize.query, maybe. There might be a better way to do it. Anyway, in theory, you can run manually. If you really have to escape from this pattern, you could run your alter table, add constraint, your SQL string itself if you have to. And you'd still want to put that in functions like this so that when you ran migrate backwards and forwards, you would do the appropriate operations in the database. Okay, so we don't have that much time left. Let's go over the last thing real quick. And I don't know if we'll have much time for random things, but ping me anytime on Slack, of course. And I like this idea of doing some pair programming, because that's something that, is just really good to do every once in a while at work, actually, is get two people working on something for a little bit. And you usually, if it's something really gnarly and like hard to figure out, just by talking about it, it helps out a ton. And it doesn't hurt if the other person's really good at it, because then they know how to do all this stuff. And that, I've benefited from that many times. So you probably will too, which is great. Okay, so we have this stuff. I will check it in. Here's our new migration. Here's our favorite color in the model. And here's the try catch stuff, and that's it. I keep switching back and forth between these, but that's silly function, whatever. New column on user model. Okay, so the last thing is test data. So this third folder that was created when we did the sequelize init, the very first command here is called seeders. And this is like test data files. So this gives you ways to save in GitHub some data so that developers who are working on your project can easily get up and running. They don't have to make a bunch of fake data themselves. You just do it once and you put it here so that you can use these tools, the command line tools to add the data whenever you need it. So I think I have like one slide on this. I call them fixtures. A lot of things calls them fixtures, but they're called seeders in Sequelize. And you do things like this. You generate a seed and you give it some name. I'm just going to copy and paste. And what this is going to do is scaffold another file, which has some code. And it's created a seed in the seeders folder with, again, with the date where it was made and just some scaffolding here. So basically, it works very similar to a migration. You have the up and you have the down, you have the query interface. It's really just like a migration. It's just a separate place to put it because this is not for altering the data itself, base itself. You shouldn't do query interface.add column here. That's not what this is for. You want to do this like this, bulk insert, just like this. And this will let you represent a whole bunch of data that you can use for testing and install it as you would, just like you migrate your database or you set up your development environment, you can set up your test data. So we'll say users, and the user will have email of user1 at the website.com. And how's about having, what else does a user have? You don't really need to have anything but an email, but we could say they all have email, a name, user number 1, a birthday, and a favorite color. Okay, so it's just an object, it's just an array of objects here. This method is bulk insert, so this is going to take every object that's in this array and add it as another row into the table that you put here, so users. Double quotes, I don't like them. We're going to get them out of here. You don't have to, I always go back and forth with my opinion on quotes, double quotes, and all that. So I'm not even sure. Okay. Okay, so we populate some users here. You could do another. So this is some users. You could add another seed for messages and make some test messages. And the down is the reverse, just like it is with the migration. So in this case, I think we can just say bulk delete users. And this is going to delete everybody. Is this going to delete everybody? I think, yeah, we're not filtering. So, okay, so let's do, once we have this, we've got this seeder thing saved. And we can say db seed all is the command. So npx, whoops, npx sequelize CLI db seed all. So this will take everything in this folder and it's going to run the up, and it's going to put that data, whoops. Oh no. Here we go. No value in column created at violates not null constraint. Oh no. So this is raw data. We need those custom columns too. Created at sequelize.now. So in this thing, it's sequelize.now. Now it might complain about updated at as well. You can't do now when you're seeding. Okay, fair enough. Everything's created on January 1st. And of course, it complains about updated. So now we should not need to add the ID here. Remember, ID is another column that's automatically added, but ID is also going to be automatically added with a type and a setup in Postgres that tells Postgres to automatically itself put the next number in. So Postgres, you don't need to give it the ID. It actually will just correctly allocate the next highest number. Because that's how it's set by default. So we get migrated. It's basically the same exact thing as migration. I'll bet this is just a copy of the migration code, which puts the stuff into here, because that's literally what it is. It has a different scaffold comment section, and it has a different folder. But other than that, this is basically the same thing as migration. We're just doing things like bulk insert, with the same interface, and this is all in the same documentation page. So bulk delete, bulk insert. You can do all of these operations in either one, but in general, this is for putting the data in, and for sure, this is not for changing tables. This stuff is for changing the tables, and that's what it's for. So if we want to, well, if we check our users now, we should see all the new users. Unless my oh, I crap, yep. Gotta actually run the server. We need like a third window. Wow, it picked up the request. So here's our 3 users that came in from the fixture, and they have all the fields. Now, if we do, there is a backwards for this, and that is, come on. DB seed undo. So I'm not sure if this will undo the latest if you, it's just, whoops. Oh, come on, it's just gonna break. Okay. I'm not sure if this will undo the latest automatically, but you can give it the name of the seed file. So did that work? Let's see. Nope, it didn't undo it. So you have to give it the name of the seed to undo. Undo dash dash name, and then the name is going to be I guess the same thing without the string in the front. Maybe it's seed. So my documentation was wrong. What a surprise. There we go. Okay, so you need the full, you need to copy this whole thing. And this is the name of the seed, which is really just a migration. It even says migration. Like it's very much just a copy of migrations in a different folder. Ah, that's fun. So it doesn't let you delete this because there are some messages. So you get a cheat and go right in the database and say delete from messages. And then we'll run it again. I know everybody's just about gone to sleep by now, but this is working. It reverted it, and then generally you won't undo it that often. But because we both deleted, we should see no users at all. So users are totally empty now because we actually bulk deleted everything. And if we migrate again, we'll only see the 3 we have. Or seed again, or whatever. This is, there it is. So we have our users. And you can imagine, see, actually these, look, Postgres still remembers that it's on number 10. It never goes back to 1 because that's all internal to Postgres. So we're on user 10, even though we've deleted all of them. But you can imagine how, you know, you build seeds for users, messages, whatever you need. And then when you save these and you commit these to GitHub, then they're there on the repository, and anybody who pulls down the repository will have them right away, and all they have to do is run that one command, the one we just did, db seed all. So this lets you get up and running and to sort of have a centralized place where you store your official test data. This is good for sort of collaborating with people because it means you don't have to do all kinds of, you only have to set this up in one place. And granted, it's very weird and clunky, but once you do it, it's in code and it'll work every time. So that is the idea behind migrations, seeding data, and we have done the scaffolding approach so that we now have all of our models are in separate files. We're importing them into the server, and we have our migrations and our test data. And this is all in our ORM. So I think tomorrow what we're going to do is, I don't think we might spend a little time just playing with this. If anybody has questions, if you want to know more about any particular thing, or really, or you want help starting scaffolding and starting to set up your own projects. So I would say make a folder with your project name. You can just do it in your own, oh, this is where I was prototyping other people's models. You can just make a folder in your own subfolder here, and, call it, project scaffold. For the whole rest of the project, I mean, really what I want this week is just those user models, or just those data models, sorry. The models for the data and the diagrams for your data. And you don't have to go set up this whole thing if you don't want. And you might want to talk to Max, because next week, he's going to be showing you like a thing called sales, and that has a whole lot of built-in stuff that we've kind of done manually here, and you might want that, but your data models will be you'll be able to translate those over to whatever it is very easily, because they're pretty much not going to change. Once, the hard part is, like someone said yesterday, the hard part is knowing what the fields are, and sort of thinking and coming up with the fields, and everything else is really just sort of applying, writing out those fields into the format that the computer wants. And that's a lot easier. You can get help with that. And we already have a pretty good scaffold of that here. But, the part that you really have to do on your own, or, that each of you is going to have to do separately, or is going to have to do quite a bit of work on, is coming up with what those fields are, what that data is. So continue to work on that. That's the homework. No reading. And does anyone have any questions? We got 4 minutes left for all the rest of the stuff. How's everyone doing? Good. Hello.
Good.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to not have to like erase my database every time I like want to do something.
Well, good. So every time you want to do something with your models, you have to write a migration, which is kind of not that much fun either, but it means, you can keep your test data, and, you'll be able to keep a progress, keep the database evolving as you work on it. So really, I mean, I think it would mean, like, don't worry too much about getting your data model right on the first try. Again, like, I'd be surprised if anybody gets all of the fields exactly right for their whole capstone on the first try. That's really not what the assignment is. It won't be graded on the basis of like whether you have to change it later or anything. The idea is you have to get something on paper. You have to get the concepts in a form that you can look at and start to think about and work with and start to build. And then you'll discover things while you're building it. But that's all part of the process. So.
Thanks.
Cool. All right. Well, I think is there anything in the channel? Oh man, there's a whole bunch of. I didn't get a ping for this.
Like me either.
Screaming snake case. I like that. I call that upper snake case, but screaming is has more of an intuitive. It's very good. Yes. Good comments, everyone. I didn't get a notification, a little number here, so I'm sorry for not seeing them and talking about them. But have an excellent evening, and see you tomorrow.
Thanks. You too.
So long.
Good night, Gus.
Bye.
Good night, guys.
Good night. So long.